A powerful 7.5 magnitude earthquake strikes Mexico, but no casualties have so far been reported. Venezuela's Foreign Minister arrives in Russia to attend Wednesday's Victory Day parade. And Burundi's National Assembly approves Alain Bunyoni as Prime Minister. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo in Quito, Ecuador. This is from the south. A powerful 7.5 magnitude earthquake has struck southern and central Mexico. The earthquake centered near the resort of Huatulco in southern Mexico, swayed buildings in Mexico City and sent thousands into the streets. Seismic alarms sounded mid-morning with enough warnings for residents to exit buildings. Power was knocked out in some areas, but there were no immediate reports of damage or injuries. And President Andrés Manuel López Obrador quickly posted to social media with initial information.
I am speaking with David Long of Civil Protection. They are reporting that it is a strong earthquake of 7.5 magnitude. The epicenter is Oaxaca, 23 kilometers south of Crucecita, Oaxaca, Huatulco. No damages have thus far been reported. We still need to communicate with Oaxaca. We are in communication with other states. In any case, everyone should be alert for any aftershock. We'll continue to inform.
The Mexican city of Ciudad Juárez, at the border with the United States, has begun to gradually reopen restaurants, hotels, and churches. Ciudad Juárez has moved from phase red to yellow as part of the relaxation of restrictions imposed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Spas, parks, and doctors' offices are also allowed to open at 50% capacity. Confirmed COVID-19 cases has passed over 185,000 in the country.
Hotels have taken countless measures, even far above what the authorities require, with the idea that our clients feel more confident about being able to come to hotels.
The restaurant was also fully sanitized 3 days ago, and we've been given a certificate of sanitization so that people can feel a little more at ease when they come in.
In Barbados, a 25-year-old photojournalist was killed on Monday while reporting on a murder. Christophe Griffith was employed with the Nation newspaper when he went to report on the death of 51-year-old Glenroy James, who had been cleaning the former residence of the Anglican bishop. James was attacked by a vagrant who reportedly slept in the abandoned building. The Nation photographer responded to a report of a body unaware that the suspect was still at that location. He was cornered and chopped to death. Guyana's appeal court has issued an order that the words "more votes are cast" per Article 177(2)(b) of the Constitution be interpreted to mean more valid votes are cast. The ruling means a presidential candidate shall be deemed to have been elected and shall be so declared by the chairman of the Elections Commission if more valid votes are cast in favor of the list in which he is the designated candidate. But order, which has been stayed for 3 days, appears redundant as the Elections Commission GCOM has already decided the valid votes. Private citizen Isling David filed the motion challenging GCOM to declare the validity of the March 2nd polls before announcing the results. It is likely that an application will be made to the Caribbean Court of Justice for this decision to be appealed. Foreign Minister of Venezuela, Jorge Raza, has arrived in Russia ahead of Wednesday's Victory Day parade. The top Venezuelan diplomat will be attending the annual celebration and carrying out a diplomatic work agenda. Russia commemorated the 75th anniversary of the defeat of Nazi invaders on May 8th, but the traditional parade at Moscow's Red Square was postponed this time around due to the coronavirus pandemic. Venezuela is continuing to battle coronavirus at its international borders with Colombia and Brazil. Madeleine Garcia brings us the latest from Gran Sabana as authorities are being met by a UN commission which will observe the protocols.
We are at the municipality of Gran Sabana on the border with Brazil, which is now the epicenter of the pandemic in the Americas. This presents a threat to Venezuela due to the inaction of the government of Jair Bolsonaro in facing this pandemic. Venezuela receives daily inflows of its own citizens, and as many as 80% of those who enter could have coronavirus. There has been an impressive logistical approach and methodology created by the government of Venezuela precisely around the border area in order to avoid the spread of the virus within Venezuela. It's a strictly and rigorously adhered to protocol. Upon entry, they detect by holding rapid tests, and it's there that it's determined whether or not they may have the virus. In both cases, be the person negative or positive, they have to spend 17 days in quarantine in the medical attention centers, and they receive care without cost. There are also provisional tent hospitals in the case that a person were to present more serious symptoms. There are currently 2 people here right now who have coronavirus and who have presented symptoms and which are receiving extensive treatment, including the use of breathing tubes, and they are now recovering and they've beat COVID-19. So now we're going to show the testimonies, and we'll be showing the images of how the methodology has been implemented in Venezuela, as today a commission from the United Nations will be accompanying, observing, and exchanging on the protocols being followed with the government of Venezuela.
We thank Madeleine Garcia for that report. And still in Venezuela, new quarantine measures have been implemented in order to fight the spread of COVID-19. These are being applied in 10 states, including restrictions to mobility, labor, and the economy.
Caracas began its week without the metro this Monday, a result of the new arrangements to radicalize the quarantine in the capital and other states. The 4th phase of plan of 7 days of partial economic activity, followed by 7 days of quarantine, has begun. During the week of June 22nd until the 28th, only users who work in the prioritized sectors can circulate in the emulated metro and rail system, telecommunication, health, water, security, energy, food, and transportation. All will need to be properly identified with ID card. Now transport authorities will be running limited metro service so that sectors of workers exempt from the quarantine order can be mobile in the areas of health, food, security, telecommunications, and services.
They've taken good measures, but in recent weeks, things have gotten away a bit because people been going out in public a lot and have not taken preventative measures, like the use of face masks, the use of gloves, that leads to people becoming infected.
The preventative measures are taken despite Venezuela presenting some of the lowest levels of contagion in the region. Last week, 24 types of economic establishments or areas were open, between malls, gyms, shoe stores, textile, banks, etc. This week, those economic sectors are called to remain closed. The quarantine is maintained along with prevention measures as countries of the region continue to see a rise in cases.
It would be good to continue, but people need to continue following rules and regulations. There are people who take off their masks or wear it just on their mouths without covering their noses. We don't accomplish anything if there are some who don't follow the rules.
The measures are aimed at stopping the coronavirus spread by taking care of health, but while progressively reactivating the economy.
In Honduras, family members of patients with COVID-19 and the Medical Workers Union condemned the government of Juan Orlando Hernandez and its management of the health crisis, which has affected 12,770 Hondurans. In the face of the collapse of a number of tents set up to accommodate those infected, the number of deaths has also surged to past 300. Health workers also said they lacked the proper protective equipment to deal with the virus, as at least 3 doctors died over the past few days after being infected. The Director General of the World Health Organization has updated global COVID-19 figures. At the same time, Michael Ryan, chief of the WHO Emergency Response Program, says that the virus is peaking in many countries at the same time.
Yesterday, more than 183,000 new cases of COVID were reported to WHO, easily the most in a single day so far. More than 8.8 million cases have now been reported to WHO, and more than 465,000 people have lost their lives.
We do not believe that this is a testing phenomenon. Clearly, when you look at hospital admissions are also rising in a number of countries, deaths are also rising, and they're not due to increased testing per se. So there definitely is a shift in the sense that the virus is now very well established at a global level. It has reached some of the most populous countries in the world, some of the most populated areas of the world, and because the epidemic is now peaking or moving towards a peak in a number of large countries at the same time, you're seeing that impact on the number of cases now.
We'll be right back, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South, more news now. Panama has 500 unemployed doctors amid a critical phase of the COVID-19 pandemic. This Monday, the Dean of the Medical School of the University of Panama, Enrique Mendoza, denounced that nearly 500,000 recently graduated doctors are unemployed, waiting for the call of the country's health ministry. Mendoza warned in an interview with a local newspaper that at this time, when there is a need to increase capacity to identify COVID-19 cases and ensure the traceability of contacts, the government and the health ministry have doctors waiting and at their disposal to support the fight against the virus. Mendoza recalled that it is striking that this workforce remains unemployed as they have the required skills, having completed 6 years of studies plus 2 years of residencies. Chile remains among the worst hit countries by the COVID-19 pandemic, registering over 7,000 deaths. Nonetheless, social organizations have continuously condemned the response of the government of Sebastián Piñera.
In many neighborhoods, citizens gather to distribute food to those in need. But even this act could now be punished by the law with up to 5 years in prison, thanks to a new law that was rushed through Congress to achieve this goal.
We believe the government has once again chosen to use violence to fight social conflicts, and their decisions goes against all logic, as their own data shows that only half of those detained for allegedly breaking this new law actually broke the law.
Chile's already overpopulated prisons have welcomed around 2,500 political prisoners under this new law.
We want to show solidarity and help make this issue visible. All the political prisoners that have been unconstitutionally detained since last year. There are many Mapuche citizens detained who have historically been enemies of the state.
They are criminalizing social movements. They are ignoring entire sectors of poor population, those most in need. Who is going to catch COVID-19? Poor people. And one person will infect many others. People are already rising up against the state across the country. This will go on, a new rebellion. Meanwhile, the government has been forced to admit they hit 3,000 deaths.
We matched the rise of cases with those of other countries, and we managed to figure out the number of possible cases. It was very hard to do this.
Meanwhile, the communist lawyer of the Coleta commune presented the first legal case against the president and his ministers.
Burundi's National Assembly has approved the nomination of Alain Guillaume Bunyoni as Prime Minister. Bunyoni, who will fill the new position of head of government created in the 2018 constitution, was backed by an overwhelming majority in a session boycotted by the opposition. He is currently Minister of Public Security and former head of the National Police. He has been under sanctions by the United States since 2015 for his role in violence against civilians and political repression. Polls have opened in Malawi in a presidential vote, the second time in just over a year, after incumbent Peter Mutharika's re-election was annulled over rigging. Some 6.8 million people from a population of 18 million are registered to cast their votes between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. at more than 9,000 polling stations across the country. Incumbent president and ruling party candidate Peter Mutharika is facing an uphill battle to fend off a challenge from opposition candidate Lazarus Chakwera. Chakwera, the leader of the country's oldest political party and biggest opposition movement, the Malawi Congress Party MCP, is widely tipped to win the elections after partnering with incumbent Vice President Saulus Shimila, Mutharika's ally turned rival. The polls come almost 5 months after a court nullified last year's disputed elections and ordered a fresh vote.
I'm very much prepared and looking forward to it because, as you can see, for one good year, Malawi has been on a standstill. Yes, everything has stopped, and I believe that maybe by voting this coming election tomorrow, things are going to return to normal. Yeah, because
I am ready to vote tomorrow. I will go early in the morning to vote to the president of my choice.
Our responsibility is to go and vote. That's why we took time to pray for our country, so that Malawi can be saved, Malawi can be preserved, that God can intervene in whatever we are doing as a nation.
Frontline health workers in the Nigerian capital Abuja have protested against the non-payment of their salaries and hazard allowance. The protesters also complained about the lack of personal protective equipment, PPE, after 14 of their colleagues were infected with the virus. On June 9th, the federal government promised to pay 2 months hazard allowance to health workers battling the coronavirus. The promise is yet to be fulfilled. Authorities in Ivory Coast say they have captured the leader of an armed group that carried out a deadly attack on a military post on June 11th. 10 soldiers died when dozens of heavily armed attackers carried out a pre-dawn attack on the military camp located on the border with Burkina Faso.
We traced it back to the commander in Mali, who was arrested. And I can tell you that the head of the commando who led the action was taken yesterday. And with our investigations, we will go further. We will establish who he was in contact with and who is behind it.
International Criminal Court prosecutors have appealed the acquittal of former Ivory Coast President Laurent Gbagbo on charges of crimes against humanity. Gbagbo and co-accused Charles Bligout were in January of 2019 cleared of allegations masterminding post-electoral violence in late 2010, which claimed more than 3,000 lives.
The trial shall erred by acquitting Mr. Gbagbo and Mr. Bligout in violation of its fundamental obligations under Article 74.5.
This and other objective facts all point in one direction: that the majority had not completed the full reasoning exercise required by Article 74.5 by the time they orally acquitted in January 2019.
However, the victims' right to truth, justice, and eventually reparation have been prejudiced by the overall failure of a trial chamber to conduct fair proceedings, and even more so by the errors identified in the prosecution brief.
More stories coming up, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. Germany has ordered a new lockdown for the entire district of North Rhine-Westphalia. This is the first of such measures since easing coronavirus restrictions have begun in the country. The move came after a coronavirus outbreak at a slaughterhouse in the town of Rede-Weidenbruck that has left more than 1,500 workers out of a total of nearly 7,000 infected.
The aim is to calm the situation, to extend the tests to establish whether the virus has spread to the population via Tony's employees.
4 police officers in France have been questioned over the January arrest of a Paris delivery driver who died after they allegedly pinned him to the ground. Cédric Chouvoit was stopped by police close to the Eiffel Tower in Paris on January 3rd for a traffic control. However, the situation quickly escalated, and a video footage shows that he repeatedly shouted, "I'm suffocated," 7 times in 22 seconds as police held him down. Father of 4, he died on the hospital 2 days after the arrest from asphyxia. None of the policemen involved have been suspended.
Mr. Macron, you must stop the use of the chokehold because you are a murderer if you allow it to happen. The chokehold is murder. There is no other word for it. And if you, as head of state, keep saying that being forced to lie belly down and the chokehold are needed for an ID check, for a driver's license, for a license plate, then, if you don't mind, you're in the club of murderers too.
The former president of Kyrgyzstan has been sentenced to 11 years and 2 months in prison for corruption. Almazbek Atambayev, who was in office from 2011 to 2017, was stripped of immunity from prosecution that he enjoyed as a former president and arrested last year on a slew of charges including corruption and the expropriation of property. In addition to a prison term, the court confiscated Atambayev's property, several plots of land, 5 cars, 4 companies belonging to him, and shares in several banks. Atambayev's lawyer said he will discuss appealing the ruling with his client.
We might appeal, but I have to meet Almazbek Atambayev at first, discuss the situation with him, and then we will decide. However, I believe that this is just a formality in this situation. As I've said before about the verdict in this court instance, everything was known beforehand. I've just been mistaken about the terms of the punishment.
Saudi Arabia announced on Monday they will hold a very limited Hajj this year to prevent a surge in COVID-19 infections. Hajj is the yearly Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca observed by Muslims across the world. According to the official Saudi press agency, this year the event will be celebrated between July 28th and August 2nd. More than 2 million people take part in the annual pilgrimage to the holy city every year. Russia will hold its Victory Day parade on Wednesday, commemorating the 75th anniversary of the Soviet Union's triumph over Nazi Germany. Our correspondent in Moscow, Lisandra Andres, has more on the latest coronavirus developments in Russia.
Despite the fact Russia is nearly 600,000 COVID-19 cases, over the last couple of weeks, the rate of daily infections has been dropping. On Monday, authorities reported 7,700 new cases across the nation, which is still a lower number than those from previous weeks. This is the reason why the Victory Day parade will be held on Wednesday, after it was delayed from the original date on May 9. Back then, the nation was still trying to flatten the COVID-19 curve, so the parade was postponed. But now, President Putin has announced that, thanks to the success of the quarantine and other restrictions, the parade can go as planned. Delegations from at least 12 countries are set to arrive to Moscow before Wednesday. State media announced that the Venezuelan government will be represented as Foreign Minister Jorge Arriaza will lead a delegation.
Monday marked the 22nd annual bilateral summit between China and the European Union. Our correspondent in Beijing, Iramsi Peraza, has more.
China and the European Union held their 22nd annual high-level summit via video conference on Monday, a meeting where they reaffirmed their commitment to work towards a comprehensive bilateral investment agreement this year. This is an important agreement for both sides, but has been held up due to some reservations from the European bloc regarding Chinese investment in the continent. Reservations, many say, are politically motivated and failed to consider the positive impact of the Chinese investment. On the Chinese side, Prime Minister Li Keqiang chaired the meeting. He reportedly had in-depth conversations on the future of the economy and investment relationship between the two sides, with the main goal of minimizing the economic damage caused by the COVID-19. This summit was originally delayed due to the outbreak of the new coronavirus. It is also come at the time of tension between China and the European Union over China's internal affairs in relation to the Hong Kong national security law, over which the European Union has expressed concern. In response to this, China has said that neither the European Union nor any state has the right to interfere in their internal affairs, as China defends all nations' right to their sovereignty. Moreover, this summit comes after the European Unions have been pressured by the United States to support its own anti-China rhetoric. As such, experts say that the European Union needs to follow its own interests and avoid the influence of the United States. In this sense, the meeting was also intended to help this issue and calm tensions between China and the European Union.
And with that report, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And be sure to follow us on social media as well. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and of course on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.